Hey Brody, so for your entire life, you have been pushed to get your life together, but because you have not been taught what you need to become a fully developed and mature adult, you cannot control the dark parts of yourself. And that dark side of your personality is your shadow. And that's just simply made up of these primal human emotions like anger, greed, withdrawal, desire. There's a lot of these types of emotions that can be a shadow. This is the video that is going to show you how to find and integrate your dark side. So I'm going to help you cut through the BS and teach you actionable things that you can do to change your life. Like literally throughout this video, your life is going to change, I promise you. So put simply, the shadow part of your personality is a part of yourself that you're oblivious to. So I'll give you an example. Imagine this is like Nazi Germany time and it's 1941. You're just a normal citizen of Germany, but you get drafted, okay? And you get stationed at Auschwitz. Hypothetical situation. More likely than not, you would be at least complicit, if not happy, to commit the atrocities that happened in Auschwitz. But this is the key point. Most people, if you propose them that thought experiment, and you might be one of these people, deny that they would ever be capable of committing that evil. So for the sake of this example, whether or not you think you could commit that, just assume that you're one of those people that don't believe you could commit that atrocity. Completely rejecting that you are capable of that evil is a very large sign that one of your shadows is your malevolence. Because realistically, there is a part of yourself, there is this micro personality that it is capable of evil. You just simply, it's in the back of your mind. You're not conscious of it. The point I'm trying to make here is that these shadows are, in a very real sense, like these are a micro personality that you are either blind to or you're not willing to accept as being part of you. And a question you may ask is, how does that shadow slot into your consciousness? So this is a abstraction of a theory from Carl Jung of how that dark part of yourself would slot into your psyche. So imagine that your psyche is an apple pie. Obviously, this is a silly example, but it gets the point across. So the Jungian theory of your psyche is that it's composed of conscious parts and unconscious parts. So hypothetically, if you denied that it was even a possibility that you would be at least complicit with what was happening in Nazi Germany as a soldier, it's a very good chance that in that conscious part of your psyche, you see yourself as a good and ethical person. But the other side of your psyche, there's a part that you're completely oblivious to, which is the part of you that is able to be malevolent and evil. And it's unconscious, so you don't know it's there, but that does not mean it doesn't exist. And the issue with that is, if you want to be, by definition, mature or a wise person, you need to be able to be both. This is what I'm getting at. The conscious part of your psyche is everything about yourself that you know about, and the unconscious part is everything that you're ignorant to. And that's important to understand, because without that conceptualization of your conscious understanding of yourself and your unconscious version of yourself, your personality can become extremely one-sided in a dangerous way. So this is a common misconception of how people identify themselves that you need to understand before we get into the juicy part of this video. So for example, if I asked you to identify yourself with some traits, you might respond with something like disciplined, humble, anxious. Like, you could have a very long list there, obviously. But there is a very large mistake with that method of identifying yourself, because you're not disciplined or lazy. You're both. You're not humble or arrogant. You're a mix of both of these things. The point I'm trying to make is that for every trait that you have, there will be an antagonist to that trait, but you cannot be one or the other of these. You are going to be a mix of both, at least if you're a mature, developed adult. So for example, you see this in people who they say that they're a perfectly disciplined person. They go to the gym every day, they work a lot every single day, but in their free time, they do find themselves being lazy. But the thing is, because they are only seeing themselves as disciplined, it's almost like they're delusionally ignorant to that time in the day that they're just doing nothing productive. That disciplined part of them is conscious, but the lazy part of them is not conscious, which means that in that case scenario, that person has a lazy shadow. They do not accept that a part of them is lazy. So this is a question that I think needs to be answered, which is, how is a shadow born? So I'm still grappling with this idea, but this is what I think is true. So as a child, we all have these just natural traits. They're intrinsic within us. We're not bad, we're not good, we're both of these things. We're not anxious or secure. We're a mix of these things. But I think a shadow gets formed when your environment forces one of those dynamic traits to become extremely lopsided. I think that's what happens when a shadow gets created. So I'll tell you a story from my life that I think represents this pretty well. So one of my shadows up until like a month ago was the heartless and rude part of my personality. And because that part of my personality was missing, essentially, I was a pushover. People would constantly exploit me for their own benefit. Like, I would have this type of problem like consistently in my life. So this is a story from my childhood that I think caused this issue. Also, this is a warning. This is where the video is going to get a little dark, so I'm just warning you. So ever since like I was a very young kid, my mom has always been addicted to drugs and alcohol. And like, it was really bad. I remember when I was like 8 years old, I remember I would get out of bed and it was time for school. So I would go over to my mom's room and I would try to like shake her to wake up, but she was so up, like she wouldn't wake up, and I had to get my sisters to drive me to school. And that's just the tip of the iceberg with her. Like, from my understanding of the antisocial behavior literature that I've read and done research into, she probably would be a diagnosable sociopath. Like, she's one of the most narcissistic and manipulative people that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I need to tell you that because it plays into the story that I'm about to tell you. This was probably the first time when I realized the games that my mom was playing with me. So this would have been around when I was like 13 or 14, I can't quite remember, but I do remember this happened on a Thursday evening. But this would happen basically every single day. Like, she would call me and tell me that she was going to pick me up after school at my dad's house around like 3:30, but she was always like 3 or 4 hours late, like if she showed up at all, to be honest. So this was one of those days that she showed up at like 6 p.m, so she's already like 3 hours late. Like, I remember the sun was setting when she was picking me up, so she's very late. I remember I was in my room just probably watching YouTube or something. I can't remember what I was doing, but I got the text that she was in the driveway. So I got out of my room and I went downstairs, and I was like about to leave, but I realized like I need to get my jacket. So I ran all the way back upstairs, put my jacket on, and then I left the house, and then I went to her car. Mind you, that whole process of me like running around to get my jacket, like from when she texted me to when I was leaving the house, that probably took like a minute. Like, it was not that long of a time. Regardless, so I get into her car and she's apparently crying. She's talking about how she wasn't sure that she was going to see me. She didn't know this, that. She thought that I was sleeping in my room. And mind you, that was never a thing. Like, I never was like falling asleep in my room to the point where she wasn't gonna see me. That never happened beforehand. And that wasn't even a red flag for me at the time. Like, I was too young to know. But the thing that I realized, which horrified me, was her eyeliner was perfect. Like, she wasn't crying. And that like broke, like that seriously. Like, when I realized that she was just lying to me about that, I felt like an idiot. And I realized like in that moment that she was just like playing games with me, but I didn't realize until like a couple months ago, like the reason that I was so out of touch with my like evil side and my ruthless side was because she had manipulated me intentionally to the point to be more compassionate. Because from her perspective, the more compassionate I was and the less disagreeable I was, the more useful I was to her. And that's how I lost touch with like my ruthless shadow. So I always was like a super compassionate person, and I still to some extent have like this savior complex. Like, I need to fix every single person that I interact with. And like, you're probably watching this and like you might not understand that. Like, I don't know if you have the same situation to me, but there's probably stories like that for you where like you can see how one of your shadows probably was crystallized. Like, and it's going to be emotional for you when you think about this. Like, right now, I'm like trying to keep it together, to be completely honest. But I want to be honest with you, because I think that a lot I need to be to create the impact that I want to create with you. Like, I cannot lie, or I can't omit stories that I think would have helped me when I was in your shoes. So that's why I'm being completely honest with you. So if y'all, so this is up. If y'all want to drop a subscription, because I make good videos like this all the time, and y'all making me cry, hit me up. So that answers like how you get shadows, right? But then the next question is like, how do you deal with these shadows? Like, what do you do with these? So this is where shadow work comes into play. So I'm gonna just answer like, what is shadow work? So to be simplistic, shadow work is the process of you realizing your shadow and also integrating it into yourself, into your current personality. And I'll explain in depth how you're gonna do this, but I just want to give you like an overarching like theory of how this is gonna work, and then we can get into the depth of it. So this boils down into realistically 2 steps. So the first step is recognizing those shadow-like qualities in yourself. And I just told you a perfect example of how one of them was formed, but I'm going to give you some exercises that will help you just see what your shadows are explicitly, and then you can realize how they get formed. Because I didn't realize that was the cause until I realized I had that shadow. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I remembered this and then I had the shadow. It was more so like, oh, I realized this was an issue for me, and then I realized that was probably why that was created. So the second step is you need to fully integrate that piece of yourself that is missing into your personality to the extent that you don't feel any negative emotion towards it. Like, the overarching goal with shadow work is to get each of your traits working in a useful dichotomy. So you're not just like having super one-sided traits, because if you're super one-sided with any of your traits, you're going to be essentially just weak. Because we can use anxiety for an example. If you are super stoic, okay, the pros of this are you're non-reactive in uncertain situations, but the cons are if there is a situation where it's life or death, you might not react quick enough. On the flip side, if you're very anxious, the pros of that are in that situation that could kill you, you probably survive. But the cons of it are the toll that the stress has on you, right? But if you can establish a dichotomy of both of these things, then you can compensate depending on the situation for the pros and cons. And you can do that yourself. And I think that's akin to wisdom. So let's get into the juicy stuff. Realizing your shadow. Your shadow has a funny way of hiding itself from you, but it will manifest itself in your emotions and your reactions towards things. So if you pay attention to what you're feeling and what you're doing, particularly if you don't understand why you did that thing, that's very likely a shadow peeking from around the corner. Because like I said earlier, just because you don't understand a shadow exists doesn't mean it won't show up. And I can make a full video on a bunch of exercises to discover your shadow, but these are the 2 best ones that I've used in my own experience. So the first exercise is looking for strong emotional reactions towards other people. So we all have these experiences where we meet somebody for the first time, but something about them inherently just irks our soul. Yet we don't ever really think what that says about us. We just think like, what's wrong with that person? So for example, I used to get very judgmental about people who are lazy, but now that I've done all of this, I realize that was a red flag, that there is a part of me that is lazy, but I simply did not accept that. So my shadow at the time was my laziness. But that was a very blatant red flag that one of my shadows was laziness, because if I had already accepted and integrated the lazy part of myself into my personality, it shouldn't bother me if somebody else is lazy, because I would understand them. But because I rejected and didn't understand the part of myself that was lazy, I was projecting that disowned part of myself onto other people. There's a quote from Carl Jung that says, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead to an understanding of ourselves." The point I'm trying to make here is, the things that bother you about other people are probably a rejected part of your own personality. And that exercise is really useful. Like, if you just look at even like your friends or your family, if you realize that there's a part about your friends and family that you resent, that's probably because you have a shadow that is related to that. But here's an exercise that you can do right now if you can't think of any of those experiences, which is challenging the good parts. So this is the second exercise that I have for you that you can do with me right now if you have a pen and paper. So I'll do this with you right now. So you want to draw a line down the middle of your paper, just like this. And on the left side here, you want to list every single good trait about yourself. So if I were to do this with you, I would write disciplined. My spelling is so hilarious because I'm talking and writing at the same time. Compassionate, smart, humble. All right, so you're gonna have more than these. This is an example. So I have these here. after you list like 10 or so of those traits, like maybe the ones that you identify with the most, on the right side of this paper, write the exact opposite trait to what is on the left side. So for an example, the opposite of disciplined would be lazy. I'm sorry, I need to point this out. That's how I spell disciplined. That is so funny. That's hilarious. Okay. All right, compassionate. Let's say heartless. Okay. So everything on the right side here has a good chance of being a shadow for yourself. Like if you look at those traits and you don't believe that that is a part of you, that is probably a shadow of yourself. This even works for like mental health, something like this. If you see yourself as anxious, your shadow could be a positive thing. Like you can have a positive or a negative shadow. I just wanted to point that out. So your shadow might be the secure part of yourself. And when you start to list out the things like this, you're literally just realizing what the one-sided traits of you are. So if you realize like, oh, I see myself as 100,000% disciplined, your shadow is going to be lazy. Or, oh, I see myself as super intelligent, you're missing the part of yourself that is stupid as hell. So if I were you, I would circle the parts of yourself on the right side that you think like, oh, this could be a shadow, and this could be something that has been caused by trauma or something, and then you can look into it with this next step I'm about to show you. So integrating the shadow. So what is shadow integration? Each of these shadows is causing you tension with how you see yourself, but as you integrate more of your shadows, like you're gonna have a lot of these, to be honest, like I'm still working on myself in this aspect, the more well-rounded you will become. Like for example, if you get annoyed when you see somebody being insecure, that probably points out that you are insecure yourself. And when you realize that and you accept that and you integrate that into your personality, the next time you see somebody who's insecure, that doesn't make you angry. You're more compassionate towards them because you understand it yourself. And also, because you understand that you are insecure in some aspects, you can start to actually work on that. You can't work on something that you don't understand or accept. And this is going to sound really simple, but honestly, the majority of shadow work is simply just figuring out what your shadow is and what caused it. And the final step of shadow work is integrating your shadow. So this is very simply, you integrate your shadow when you can accept a certain part about yourself without any negative emotion tied up with it. That's basically the point. Like integrating your shadow, it just boils down to acceptance of the shadow. So I hope that I could change your life with this video, and remember to get 1% better today.